Welcome to a live recording of the HSP podcast. I'm Julie Bieland, and today's topic is emotional wounding support during hard times. And we're here with Willow McIntosh.
Hi, Julie. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and it's so lovely to have our members from the sensitive empowerment community are here live. And we get to chat before we start. That's always fun to connect. And we really love that you're here with us. Just the energy that it creates when we're together is just so fun, right? Right, Willow?
Absolutely. Yeah, it makes such a difference for us to know you guys are here supporting, asking your questions and holding the space. So yeah, wonderful.
Yeah, I love that part. So let's talk a little bit about, what a great time to talk about emotional wounding. I know that people are, HSPs especially, highly sensitive people are really impacted, especially those that are scoring high on my sensitivity scale, like I am high up there. And we really have a tendency to absorb pain around us. We absorb the world's pain. And it can be difficult. And I also wanted to give sort of an example, some examples of emotional wounding, right, Willow? Let's give some examples.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds great. I'm so pleased we're diving into this topic.
Yeah, so things like painful world events, images that we're seeing on the news, discrimination, hatred, some negative social media experiences. Things like, many of us have experienced a death or pain of loved ones, and I'm including animals and even trees. A lot of us are very connected to trees. And even, this might surprise you, but even negative self-talk and criticism can be emotionally wounding for us. If we're having self-criticism, it can be emotionally wounding. And of course, health issues, and including, physical health and mental health challenges can all create emotional wounding, right, Willow?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's so helpful for us to openly talk about this, because I think for much of us as HSPs, we tend to struggle alone with this. We feel sometimes that, it can alienate us a little bit because we're experiencing things so deeply, and we think, why is it this is affecting me so much? And sometimes, almost like we get embarrassed to talk about that. So I think it's really important for us to normalize this a little bit, and just to help us, all of us, to realize that this is normal for us, and there are ways that we can help and manage this. And as you say, Julie, there's so many different ways, different things that can affect us, and for us to be aware of that, and to do what we need to really manage that. And interestingly, actually, the place where I'm staying here, we had to have a tree removed because it was the roots were causing subsidence underneath the property, and there was no way around it. Like, it had to happen. And I could feel what was happening, and it was affecting me. And when, after the tree came down, I kind of just spent a little bit of time with the tree, and I could really feel the energy of what had happened there. So, while sometimes these things can feel flippant to others, we actually really do feel these things. And I think it's important to acknowledge this, and for us to really, be there for each other, and to recognize that it's okay, and that there are ways to handle these things.
Yeah, and who's relating? Those of you listening live, how many of us have felt like the way that we react or the way we experience something is really different than a lot of people around us? A lot of us have gotten messages that there's something wrong with the way we're experiencing that. And I want to validate that. I think that's a big part of our hopes today, is that, we're talking about things from high level sensitivity, and being, 20% of the population has high sensitivity, but I'm even talking about the top 5%. I think a lot of us in the sensitive empowerment community are probably top 5% sensitivity, way up there. So even our experiences would be different than those lower on the scale. Yeah, we're getting a lot of completely resonating. Alicia says, absolutely. Jessica, Becca says, yes, ma'am. Yeah, it's really incredible how much we can get impacted by things. And the opposite too, like Willow, when they planted a bunch of trees in front of me, I literally cried. I was so happy to have these trees near me. And it really is a big deal for us too. I remember even things like when my kids were little and we take them to the swimming pool, and if there would be like bees that landed in the water dying, I would be so impacted. I'd have to like go through the whole pool and like save as many of the bees as I could. Oh, it's a part of me.
Yes, I'm exactly the same. There's bees here bees here that collect honey from the local trees along the beach here. And whenever I swim first thing in the morning, every morning I'm rescuing a bee. And it's the thing is because if I'm watching an animal, I can feel it. Like I can't sit there and watch it. I have to do something about it. And I think it's when we're having these experiences, it is about us managing our, obviously, our own pain and our own discomfort and making sure we're doing what we can. But it's also the awareness that, we care very deeply and we quite literally feel to the extent that we do. And isn't that beautiful? Isn't that wonderful that we have that capacity to, to want to help and to want to do something about it because of this capacity that we have to feel so deeply.
Absolutely. And I've always believed this, that it's HSPs that are going to make a difference in the world because we feel things so deeply. That's what is beautiful about feeling deeply. And I think that really being able to acknowledge and normalize that is important. And really that's kind of like, for me, I also want to go through several things that help, because, and for all of you that are out there taking notes along the way while we talk, I want you to know I'm going to put all of these things that help in the show notes, and you'll be able to find them at hsppodcast.com. The show notes will have the list of things that help in case you didn't get everything written down. It'll be there. So one of the things that I want to start with is that, and this is a new concept for some people, some of you in the community have definitely heard me talk about it, but thinking about emotional injury as the same as physical injury, in the sense that it involves a time of care and nurturing healing. That's a big one, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, to give us the space and time that we need to heal in the same way that we would heal a physical injury. Absolutely, absolutely. And to recognize, that the time it takes and the care and the attention in the same way. Absolutely, I completely agree.
Yeah. And that's important to acknowledge. So if we're getting messages from other people that the way we're responding is wrong, let's not listen to them. Let's listen to the other HSPs that experience this in the same way. Yeah, Lynn is making a comment too about passing a snail and needing to stop and help it. Oh my gosh, I do the same thing. I was like, if I see a snail on the sidewalk, I'll have to like set it off to the side so nobody steps on it. Yeah, this is our real experience as HSPs, and I love that we're talking about it. So some more things is really just to lovingly acknowledge the emotion. This is a big one for me because I know I didn't used to be able to do this. I didn't used to be able to think of my emotional wounding in the same way as physical wounding. I didn't think of it as something that I could lovingly acknowledge. Instead, I used to be at a place where, and I think a lot of us are like that until we do this kind of deeper work and understand our traits, spend time with HSPs, is thinking there's something wrong with how we experience things, that it's so intense for us. And then we have possibly in our upbringing, we've been told, why are you reacting that way? Why are you so sensitive? What's wrong with you? It's not that big of a deal. So you get these messages that you're feeling something so extreme inside of you, and you're being told, you're invalidated for that experience. So, I think a big mission for me and Will is that we want to validate these experiences. This is how we experience the world too. And, things like checking in with your inner child with self-compassion, and, how we might respond to children. If we see a child hurting, we're going to be loving, caring, gentle, patient, compassionate. These are things that we can train ourselves to be towards ourselves. And I had to train myself. And I know when I went through, I'm coming out of some health challenges that I had. And when I look back at what I was feeling in the moment, it was so difficult. And it was, if I didn't have self-compassion, I would have really gone to a very difficult place, because if we're already hurting in some way, and then we're being, self-critical, we're really just going deeper and deeper into really hard places. So that self-compassion that we talk about is huge.
I think that is one of the most important pieces around this, Julia, is when we add on extra self-judgment, it makes everything so much harder to come through. So, when we're having whether it's, a physical pain, emotional pain, spiritual pain, whatever it may be, it's initially to recognize, okay, this is going to take a bit of time for me to come through this, and I need that extra level of self-care, just the way that you're describing it right now, Julie. And I think that when we add on judgment, or we add on self-criticism, or that we're making it wrong in some way, or we're discounting our feelings, that is when it gets really difficult, and then it becomes a much bigger entity to come through.
Yeah, definitely. It magnifies it in a way that makes it unbearable. And oftentimes I think we kind of go through the process when I used to work with clients as a psychotherapist. I would you work a lot in these areas with clients, because if we are, a lot of times we're hearing messages that we received from our caregivers as children. And I often say, it's like, go through a filtration process. Filter out, are those your genuine feelings, or were those messages you received? And a lot of times you can tell the difference by, HSPs are like the most compassionate people in the world towards others, and really struggle a lot with self-compassion, because we tend to be so hard on ourselves. So think about how you would feel about somebody else in that situation who's emotionally wounded. You'd probably be really compassionate and really supportive with them. So try to bring some of that energy back to yourself. That's really helpful. And one thing that I know really helped me during times that were really hard for me were reminding myself that the intensity of the feeling is temporary, and it won't feel that way forever. That sounds like such a simple statement, but that changed my life. Acknowledging that emotion that I'm experiencing is temporary, because it used to be when I was in an emotion, I would think, there's something, it feels like you're just going to feel that way forever, and it's going to be that painful forever. But like going through my recent challenges, I was able to do that for myself this time, to say, you know what, it's not going to always feel like this. And I had some kind of level of awareness this time that I didn't used to have, and that really supported me through the experience.
Amazing. Yeah, I think that is such a powerful insight. It really is. That wonderful expression, this too shall pass. And I find that really helps me too. Is that, it's, if my energy's low or something, there's a difficulty, there's something happening, so this too shall pass. And as I say that, I think, okay, yeah, this isn't permanent. But it's so hard to think that in the moment. We think, oh my God, as you say, exactly that, I'm always going to feel like this. But it does change. Of course, it changes, and have it's. I think it's around. We're almost parenting ourselves a little bit when something difficult happens. It's an opportunity to switch into our own higher sense of caregiving for ourselves, and utilizing these tools that you're sharing, and all the amazing other tools that you have, Julie, in your resources. But I think that's the opportunity, is rather than descending. It's actually to know that we have everything within us to care for ourselves. It's just a matter of switching our awareness a little bit. Exactly in the examples you're giving right here, Judy, is how you've come through what you have recently, with that higher sense of awareness and knowing. And I think it's so important for us to give that to ourselves.
Yeah. And, that was part of my experience too, was I felt everything so intensely, and I had so much suffering in my early life that it became really important to me to create resources that help other sensitive people. And that's one of the things that shows up the most in our community, in our sensitive empowerment community, is that a lot of people say when they join that they're kind of surprised at how, comfortable it is to be able to, feel this sense of belonging with people who get it, and to be able to talk openly without having anybody say, like, invalidate you. To be in a situation that's validating is life-changing, and really accepting ourselves as deep feelers. And I like to think of it in terms of the ebb and flow of nature and accepting your flow. That's something that's been big for me. Like, I tend to get really low energy in the winters, and that I used to get so like upset with myself that I was experiencing life like that. And then I started looking at the trees and I was thinking, wow, they all lost their leaves. They're in this sense of dormancy. And it's so interesting that I cycle in the same way. And I started thinking of it more in the cycle of nature. So as soon as spring comes and all those blossoms are out, I start to have my energy back and I start to feel better. And so what if I could just simply accept my ebb and flow of nature instead of being hard on myself? I'm not hard on the trees that are losing their leaves and all the plants that go into dormancy. We're not hard on that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's so true. Yeah, I think, if sometimes I think that we feel like we should always be in control of ourselves. We should be able to control and manage ourselves and our feelings. And, when something goes wrong or we feel bad, it's like, why can't I make that go away? Or why can't I change it? You're absolutely right. We are in flow exactly as nature is. And having that element of equanimity in a sense, to which obviously that's not an easy thing to master at all, but to have that sense of this is how things are at the moment, and to have self-compassion as we're going through those ebb and flows. And I think there's something actually really interesting that you touched on just now, Julie, which was around recognizing what are our feelings and what are not our feelings. So whether that is messages or conditioning that we had from our caregivers, or whether it's actually feelings and experiences that are going on outside of us that we tend to own as ours. So many of us are highly empathic, and there is a phrase known as clair empathy, which I'm sure many of us here are familiar with, which is actually an ability to literally feel what other people are feeling. And I think when the world is going through a difficult experience, difficult times, or even when we are around other people that are going through difficult times, sometimes by taking on the feelings of others, we feel that they are our own, and therefore we end up processing other people's feelings. And there's a difference there between having compassion and supporting others, and knowing when something is not ours, and therefore it re-empowers us and gives us that strength and capacity again to act accordingly, so we're not so we're not responding inappropriately.
I'm so glad you're talking about that. That is such a good one. And it is hard to distinguish that sometimes, especially if we're living with somebody that's going through a hard time, or we're watching too much news and we're seeing a lot of visual images that can get very distressing until we're falling apart. And I know Alicia is asking a question about how or when do we know when we need to go or walk away from a situation that's so emotional and intense, or is it just more inner work? Like, for example, if it's related to a relationship. And I think some of what we're going to talk about right now might answer that question, because it's important for us to work at the practice of separating our energy from other people, and then going internal and doing that inner work, doing that grounding work. And things like when I was in the hardest part of what I was going through, I would do things like stop your to-do list. For example, I know HSPs, we just love being productive and we kind of want to control the outcome of everything, but we have to stop our to-do list because we need to focus on things like, what do I need at this moment? Letting go of some of those responsibilities. It gives us a chance to focus on what we need. And it's okay to say no. It's okay to change plans. How many times of HSPs we've talked about this, that maybe we had a bunch of energy when we said yes to plans. And then when the plan came around, we're really depleted. It's okay to say no. And in fact, it's important. We have to take care of our own needs, because if we're falling apart, we can't help anybody. So that practice of really upping your self-care, spending a lot of time in nature. We were talking about this before we were recording, Willow, about water, being in water, near trees, near quiet places. We really benefit from that on a daily basis, spending a little time, making sure we're slowing down, that we're letting go, that we're asking for help if we need it, that we're overall really tending to and prioritizing our own wellness. Because, for example, I'm a parent, and if I couldn't take care of my own needs, how am I going to take care of my kids in the way that I want to take care of them, and my relationships and my work, my greater work? Like if I was constantly glued to the news and falling apart at all the images I was seeing, I wouldn't be able to create resources that help HSPs. And I just use that as an example that there are ways for you to make positive change in the world, but we've got to take care of our own well-being first.
Beautiful. Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely. Yes, it has to be that way round. We have to make sure that we're tending to our own needs. In the same way, I mean, it's a simple analogy, but in airplanes they say, if the oxygen mask comes down, you put your own on first before you help your child. And that feels a bit counterintuitive, but the problem is if you pass out, you can't put your mask on your child.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's similar in that way that we have to make sure that as you say, that we're tending to our own needs first, to make sure that we have the strength and the power to help others. And I think one of the things that really has helped me over the years is when I find myself getting into a mix of emotions, and if I'm around others or I'm in a relationship, whatever it may be, I ask myself the simple question: is this mine? And very quickly I can tell if it is or it isn't. But it's only when I actually ask myself the question, I think, okay, no, actually this isn't mine. So then it changes my experience internally, and it gives me a whole new set of resources to be of much better service to the people around me.
I love that. And that's a powerful statement, to pause and say, is this mine? That is such a powerful statement. I find when the people closest to me are hurting, that is the most difficult for me. And I sometimes need to separate my space too, to be able to even ask that question, to kind of separate, to go into a grounding state, being able to check in and say, is this mine? What's happening? What's coming up for me? This is something I have been doing a lot over the past couple of years, that it was different than I've ever did before, because my self-talk used to be negative, as a lot of HSPs experience. And now when I'm feeling something that's bothering me, upsetting, maybe I've absorbed something or I don't even know where it's coming from, I just sometimes pause and I put my hand on my heart, take some deep breaths, and I just kind of say, okay, what's going on? Almost like I'm talking to my inner child. It's like, okay, you're upset about something. Okay, that makes sense. So go through and validate my own experience. And it's like, what do I need right now? Okay, is this mine? Is this theirs? What is this? So I'm giving myself a chance, just like you would talk to a friend to help help them sort out what they're experiencing. We can do that for ourselves also, even through journaling, talking to friends, talking to a therapist, all those kinds of things. If you don't have a therapist, hopefully we have an HSP practitioners directory on my website that you can find an HSP therapist or healer. And I really think that all HSPs really benefit as long as you find the right match. And some of my things that I did too during things that were hard for me were like cuddling my pets and practicing mindfulness, slowing down my movements, slowing down what I was doing. Looking at the sky a lot, whether it's the sunset, sunrise, watching the clouds move slowly. I feed birds, so I love listening to the birds and focusing on all those different sounds. Even looking at little plants, like if you can't get to nature one day, maybe you can bring some plants around your home and really, really connect with them, the little leaves and blooms, and make time for those little things to fill up that positivity tank. And many of you heard me say this before, but if you haven't heard it yet, it takes 8 positives to neutralize 1 negative. So that's a lot. Negative stuff just falls into our lap, but the way the brain works, you have to actually focus on those positives for 15 to 20 seconds for them to actually absorb. So when you're looking at that sunset, really soak it in. Take that time to let it soak in and really feel that positivity fill up. What are some of the things you do, Willow, that are your positivity fill ups?
Yeah, I absolutely. You know, they're quite similar actually. I find that it makes such a difference for me when I do these things. Like when I'm busy and I'm being productive, and I feel my energy shifting. I think I really need to take a break. I think no, but I should just get this done. But then I've learned now that just taking that time, or if I'm going through something difficult stage in life, by taking that time out to be in nature and just to experience the energy of nature, I find it's incredibly healing. It's literally state shifting, and it can happen so quickly. Like getting into the sea for me is one of the big ones that immediately shifts my state. I find it really difficult to maintain a bad mood when I jump in the water.
Just saying that to my friend the other day, I was like, I feel like it's kind of impossible to be in a bad mood looking at the ocean. That's
Yeah,
so true.
it really is. Yeah, yeah. I think there's something that happened. I'm sure there's probably a very interesting study or a dissertation to be done on this, but there is definitely something that happens to us energetically when we're in nature. We seem to merge with it. We seem to tune in. I find it incredibly healing. So that's one of them, definitely. Swimming is one for me. Walking a lot. I walk every day. That really helps to give me space around my thoughts. It re-energizes me. I love the adventure of walking, what I'm going to find, what I'm going to see. Journaling for me is a huge one. Journaling is something that I do on a very regular basis, no matter what I'm going through, whether it's having a great time or whether I'm having a difficulty or whatever it may be. I'm able to have really in-depth conversations with myself through journaling. I'm able to access a higher intelligence in myself. I can ask myself questions, and I can see the Y or the N for yes or no on the page, expand or contract in my mind's eye, which guides me as to whether something is a yes or a no. But being able to actually organize my thoughts and just to work through things, like sometimes if I feel overwhelmed or there's too much going on in my head, if I just start to write it down and it really helps me to just quieten that busyness, and then I can recenter. So for me, it's a huge one.
Yeah, journaling is great. Journaling, talking, all those things bring us to like stuff out of our emotional brain into our cognitive brain that makes more sense to us, makes us be able to understand what we're experiencing. And Kristen's agreeing with you. She loves doing walking, running, dancing. I think movement is a big one too. I do a lot of walking also. And I also like what Caroline said about visiting local nurseries. That is something I love doing too, looking at all the beautiful plants, and then each season is a different things are blooming. I just love doing that also. And even things like I love my weighted blanket. I find that that's incredibly soothing and relaxing. We've talked some about like having herbal teas, cuddling pets, taking baths. And when you're in a state that's like, it's more than you can bear in the moment, thinking of really the very basics. So just make sure you're drinking water, that you're getting some food in, maybe you take a bath, doing real basics. Is if you're really in a moment that things just seem very difficult. And maybe your success one day is that you took a shower and you ate something and you drank some water, and that was your success. Then let that be your success. Things will get better. Things will not always be as they are on those really hard days. And make sure you're being kind and loving and patient with yourself, so you're not adding additional pressures or expectations, things like that. Really follow your flow of I really love the concept of listening to your body every day. What does it feel like? What does it need that day? And paying attention to that rather than the to-do list is a really good thing. And we had talked about limiting news watching for HSPs. I think visually seeing images, remember that, there's a lot of great things happening in the world too. Of course, there's terrible, just horrendous things happening in the world, but there's also a lot of great things happening in the world. And so we often say, look for the helpers, look for those stories. And when you're taking care of your own needs, you can become someone who is making positive change in the world too.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that. I love that. I think actually, because the mainstream news, I never ever watch that. And what I found is that there are alternatives that give me the information that I need. So there's particular sources that I go to that give me, so I have updates, so I know what's happening. There's a few of them that I use. There's actually a comedian, a British comedian called Russell Brand, who's now, his YouTube channel is all about current affairs and what's happening in the world. And I'm able to actually get a really interesting picture of what's happening through his depiction of of the information that he's gathering. That's one example that I use. There's also just what you were saying, Julie, about there's another resource. I think it's called Good News Network. I think it's called,
Yeah.
where you know that one, when it's actually listing great things that are happening in the world.
Yes.
I think that's so important for us to get that balance. It's like, yes, there's a lot happening, but to remember that mainstream media is all about the bad stuff. There's no good stuff there. So,
Yeah.
well, very, very rarely. So, but that's not the picture of the world. It's not all bad. There is a whole other side to it. And I think that's very important for us to remember that. Because if we get too stuck into the bad, it's almost like, oh my God, the world is bad. And that's not the case. So I agree with that. Definitely a balanced, definitely balanced media.
Yes, totally. I love what Kristen says, just logging into our community as a stream of positive news. I love that, Kristen. Thanks for sharing that. Yes, that's what we try to do in the sensitive empowerment community. We're actually really conscious about our positivity fill-ups. We're conscious about how we write our posts, things like we have a post that's called The Uniqueness of an Empowered Community versus a Dumping Community, because social media is often a dumping community. It's a very stressful place to be for a lot of sensitive people. And we know that news outlets and social media often focus on the negative because that's somewhat addicting in terms of how the brain is. The brain is focused on the negative because that's how our ancestors survived, by focusing on all the things that could go wrong. But it's really a conscious way of living to change some of that, to make sure that you're also focusing on all the good things that are happening in the world. It's such a huge thing. And I want to give the community a chance to ask any questions that you might have. If you've already asked them and we didn't see them, go ahead and pop them into the comments now. And I also want to share, talk about a couple more things too, while you guys are putting in your questions. It is important to spend time in communities that are safe and positive. And that's something that we really focus on a lot in our sensitive empowerment community. So I definitely hope you all consider, those of you listening to this podcast, consider joining us. We really warmly welcome you. And we do virtual meetups, which are really fun, that we can connect to each other. We do our live podcast there. We do events. We have a lot of fun things coming up. It's so much fun, all the things that are coming up. Learn some yoga, painting, and as well as, of course, education about the trait and how to thrive. We even have a topic in the community that's called Tips and Tools to Thrive. And I actually everything that I experience and the tools and tips that I use, I write that in this topic in the community so that I'm sharing my experiences. And also I want to point everybody in the direction of my brain training course and the HSP toolbox course. I think both of those courses could be really excellent for supporting you further. The brain training is really good for reducing anxiety. We see a lot of HSPs are able to reduce their anxiety within the first week or two of this 8-week program. And then the HSP toolbox course gives you a lot of daily tools. It's the daily tools that I've developed that I use, that we've grown together as a community to use. And you can find all of that at sensitiveconnection.com, including our podcast episodes. There's tons of free resources on my website as well. And, just all focused on supporting HSPs.
Yeah, absolutely. I really recommend these resources. Sometimes we hear these things, if you're new to the community, or, you haven't had the opportunity or the inspiration to try one of these courses. What can be so powerful is it only takes one or two new awarenesses, a new phrase, a new affirmation, something that's been discovered through years of working and being with HSPs. Sometimes you can get shifts that make a massive difference to things. Like over the years, I've come across the different resources and tools and techniques that I have over the years, and they can be life-changing sometimes. So, it really is worth exploring and trying these things, because there's no way of knowing quite what's there until you give it a go, and it really can make a massive difference.
Yeah, just being together too with HSPs is so powerful. Like, I just think that's so, all of you that are with us live right now, I just think this is incredible, because if you think about it, you've entered into a group, you did that intentionally, and you came into one of these live events that we do. That's really amazing. And it shows the kind of people that you are, that you want to bring something into your life that's a positive, that you're making that intentional, empowered choice. And I think that's such a beautiful thing. And it is part of, we all start from this personal foundation of, supporting ourselves through the world. And as sensitive people, you guys have heard me say this a lot, the world is not set up for sensitivity. And many of us have been invalidated for our experiences. And it's really magical and important to spend time with other HSPs, no matter where you're doing that. It's important to do that. And I'm really proud of the community that we've developed here. I love that we're together from all over the world, and that we support each other. And it's just such a loving space, and it's a beautiful place to spend time. So we definitely hope to welcome you there. And anything else you'd like to say on the subject, or any other questions that the community has? Willow, do you have anything that you would like to share?
I think just what you're saying around the community as well, I completely agree with that. It makes such a difference. Like we don't have to be in this experience of being an HSP alone. It's not something we should be doing. There's a difference between being introverted and needing our own space, and being disconnected from our tribe. So, even if we're not perhaps very perhaps we don't like being online in terms of social media and all the busyness of it, there is a big difference with being online around people who are really like-minded, who really get our needs and understand how we experience the world, understand the things that we aspire to. It makes a huge difference. I experience that a lot in the work that I do with HSPs. When they kind of get them first together in a group and get them chatting, it's like, wow, it's so good to be able to actually be honest about what I'm seeing and thinking and feeling. And there's someone else who thinks and sees and feels things in the same way. It makes massive changes. So yeah, I really, really recommend it, definitely.
Yeah, it's like we're being intentional about what we're exposing ourselves to. Right? Like, who we're around makes a difference, how we're supporting ourselves through what we're going through. If every single one of us has experienced emotional wounding, and there are ways to support us through that. And to be intentional and conscious about it really does make a big change. And Willow, you and I have talked a lot about our early life, and how neither one of us would be doing what we're doing right now if we hadn't really supported ourselves, taught ourselves these tools, really became intentional about how we take care of ourselves. It makes a difference. And in how we experience life as sensitive people, it just really does make a difference, because we can have control over some of those things about what we expose ourselves to, how we support ourselves through what we're going through. And most of all, to know that you're not alone. There's 1.4 billion sensitive people in the world, all over the world. And I love that we get to be together from all over the world. And it's just so important. So just remember that. Remember how special you are. Remember that you're needed and valuable, and that there's ways to support yourself and get support around emotional wounding. That's how we get through this life as sensitive people, and can make, be part of the change the world needs, because that's what I believe, that HSPs are the ones to do that.
Yes, absolutely. And the more that we can look after ourselves, and the more that we can understand who we really are, the more we come into touch with our values and our abilities and our gifts, and especially our place here in the world. And we really are needed more than ever. And we say that a lot, but there are a lot of changes happening right now, and our voices are really needed. And the more that we can be in our power and our self-loving and our strength, the more our voices are going to be heard, and the more we're going to trust our voice.
Absolutely. And Willow and I have so many wonderful podcast episodes we've done together, and I definitely invite you guys to come over and see them. If you go to sensitiveconnection.com, you're going to see the podcast, and you'll see a link that says Julie and Willow, and that will bring you to a page that will show all the podcasts we've done together, which we've talked about so many wonderful conversations. I've really enjoyed doing this with you, Willow, and I want to thank the sensitive empowerment community for being here with us, and being able to be in your energetic space is always a real gift. Just love you guys. And for anyone that's out there experiencing emotional wounding, I want to send you love and light and hugs, and let you know that we're here for you, and that just knowing that there's sensitive people in the world that care deeply about you and your experience in the world. I just want you all to know that.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well said. Absolutely. Absolutely. Me too. We're here for you, and you are here for you too. And by allowing yourself to learn ways to manage yourself and manage your energy and look after yourself, there's always a way through, no matter what you're experiencing. And there are always people around that can help.
Yes, definitely. Get those supportive people around you. And there's so many great comments going through the chat. I'm going to upload all those comments and put them into the community and read through them afterwards too. So I want to send all of you lots of love, and I just love who you are as sensitive people. And I love that you're in the world, and I love that we get to share our journeys together. I want to just send a big love out to all of you. Thank you for being with us today. Love you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.